Much like Metroid 2, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening was a game that a lot of people wanted to see brought into the modern era. The Game Boy was a fantastic system, but let's face it, there were technical limitations to that system. So when it was announced that Link's Awakening was coming to the Nintendo Switch with a remake, a lot of people were very excited for this game, myself included. I remember getting Link's Awakening DX with my Game Boy Color and absolutely falling in love with this game, playing it over and over and over again, and it's a game that I have many fond memories of. So I was definitely looking forward to Link's Awakening on the Nintendo Switch. The game has been scoring really well, and it seems like a lot of people are really loving this game. But are some people overlooking some things with this game? Is nostalgia clouding people's judgment when it comes to Link's Awakening on the Nintendo Switch? That's kind of what I want to talk about in this video today, because I feel like some reviewers have maybe been missing a few things with this game. I want to talk about the truth of Link's Awakening for the Nintendo Switch. So sit back, relax, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let's talk about the truth of Link's Awakening for the Nintendo Switch. So if you've never played The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening before, it's definitely a game that is tried and true in the Legend of Zelda formula. If your first game to Zelda was Breath of the Wild, this game is going to feel very different to you. But this is sort of the Zelda style that a lot of us grew up playing and a lot of us grew up falling in love with. Basically, the game starts out and Link is awakened on a shoreline, and you're like, where am I? What is this place? What's going on? You're brought into a house, and then you start out on your adventure after you go and get your sword. And now you're on this island, and you're trying to figure out what's going on this island, and everyone keeps talking about the windfish. So basically, the story is pretty slow, but actually the second half of the story is actually pretty good. It's one of the more darker stories in the Legend of Zelda timeline, and I actually really enjoyed the story of the game. It sort of is a world where you have to seek out the story in order to get more information on it, but I like that about the game. I think that actually works in this style, and they sort of improve things to make a few things a bit more clear in the grand scheme of things when it comes to the story of this game. So the gameplay formula in The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening is pretty much the tried and true Zelda style that was pretty much the standard until games like Breath of the Wild, where you would go into a dungeon, you would defeat the dungeon, usually get an item in that dungeon, something that will help you progress throughout the game. And I like this style still. I think both styles definitely have a place. I think the open world style of Breath of the Wild is great, but I do like the structured style of the dungeons in this game. Now, one thing that's been vastly improved over the Game Boy game is the actual combat in the game. Everything feels a lot more fluid and a lot more responsive. You're able to do things that you really weren't able to do with the Game Boy version of the game, and combat just feels a hell of a lot better. It's a definitely more enjoyable experience in terms of gameplay. It's definitely a bit faster as well, and I think this actually works in this style of game. I actually like what they did to improve the gameplay in terms of the combat in this game. You're constantly getting more weapons in the game. Of course, there is your trusty sword and shield, and you get things like a boomerang, a bow and arrow, hook shot, pretty standard stuff, but once again, it works very well in this game, and I really sort of like how they improved upon the gameplay of the game. Of course, the dungeons themselves and even the overworld have some sort of puzzles in them for you to solve, and a lot of the puzzles in the game are actually pretty fun. There's a lot of challenge in here, figuring out where to go, maybe swapping items with different characters to get different items and unlock different secrets within the world. There's a lot of things to do in this game, and I think that actually is something that is showcased better in the Nintendo Switch version of the game. There's a ton of different mini games, such as fishing, such as a crane game, and some of these are essential in order to get different items and get progress throughout the game. So I like all of the different variations in the gameplay style. Now, one of the cool things about this game are the 2D segments in the game. I really enjoyed the 2D segments back in the day, and I think they look fantastic and they play fantastic nowadays. You're going to see characters that you wouldn't expect in The Legend of Zelda, such as characters from Mario games, and that's really cool. There's a lot of little touches in the game. There's actually been some added touches into the game as well that reference other Nintendo characters, so very cool stuff. I think the 2D segments in these games are very underrated. There's a very fun 2D boss battle as well, so if you like sort of different styles in your Legend of Zelda game, you're going to enjoy these small 2D segments that end up popping up throughout the game. Now, two things that they added to The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening from the Nintendo Switch that I was definitely excited for was an improved map system and, of course, a dungeon building system. Now, the improved map system is absolutely fantastic. It makes the game a lot more streamlined. You're able to see things on the map and figure out where you need to go, whereas the Game Boy version of the game did not really have that feature. The Dungeon Maker is kind of okay. I really didn't spend as much time as I thought I would within the Dungeon Maker, and I'll tell you guys why later on in the video. It's okay, it's sort of there, but it wasn't anything that that really gripped me. One thing, of course, they improved in The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening for the Switch is the graphics of the game. And I think this graphical style looks absolutely fantastic. Has sort of a claymation, maybe toy style look to it, but I think it looks absolutely great. All the characters look awesome. Bosses look really cool as well. Some of the environments look absolutely fantastic. Dungeons themselves have little intricacies in them. Definitely some very cool stuff in terms of graphics. I know some people won't really care for that graphical style, but I think they absolutely nailed it for the most part when it comes to the graphics of the game. The audio is vastly improved as well, and some of the music in this game is absolutely fantastic. Play the level 6 dungeon and tell me that's not one of the most brooding songs you've ever heard in a Legend of Zelda game. I love the remixes that they did, and I think it sounds absolutely great. So the gameplay is still fantastic. They've improved upon the gameplay. They've added things like a dungeon maker and a better map system. The game itself looks pretty fantastic as well. So what are the problems with this game? There's a ton of content here. There's a ton of mini games, a ton of unlockables. What are the things that other reviewers seem to be missing in their reviews? Well, let's go back to the graphics really quickly. Now, like I said, I absolutely love the graphical style of the game, but there are some performance issues that I feel like are just being glossed over. The main problem is the frames per second, or FPS, if you will. Now, I'm not a technical wizard by any stretch of the imagination. I don't have cool little glasses like Spawnwave, so I'm not really big on FPS stuff, but when it comes to the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, it's noticeable, and that's where things get kind of tricky for me. The game seems to run mostly at 60 frames per second, but it randomly drops to 30 frames per second, especially on the overworld sections. When you go to the Animal Village, there's a section of the game that just seems to come to a crawl, and it's kind of like, how did we not notice this? And it just seems to pop up more and more frequently. I had 2D sections where it seemed like the frame rate was getting sluggish as well, and it's like, I get it maybe, like obviously this is a cool looking graphical style, but is it really pushing the Nintendo Switch to the point of where there's such a drastic drop in frames per second? It's just an annoying thing, and it happens more and more often as you get deeper into the map and go into other sections of the map, and occasionally it creeps up in a dungeon as well. There's also a weird blurring around the edges of the screen, which I guess was sort of a artistic style thing, but once again, it's not something that I'm a huge fan of when it comes to this game. It's something that I feel it really didn't need to be done. Maybe some people enjoy that blurring, but definitely the FPS problem is something very noticeable. Hopefully Nintendo can do a patch or something like this. It doesn't break the game or anything like that, but it is a problem that seems to creep up from time to time. Another small issue I had with the game was the lack of D-pad support. You actually move Link with the analog stick, and you can't use the D-pad at all. You can move it, but it doesn't do anything. So that's just kind of weird to me, considering this game was built on a D-pad with the original game. But the most annoying thing with The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening for me personally has to be the outdated inventory system. Now, if you're unfamiliar with how Link's Awakening's inventory system works, obviously with the Game Boy, you had a limitation when it came to your buttons. So you would have certain items mapped to different buttons, and you would have to go into the inventory system and switch out these items as you go along. Now, in the early stages of the game, it's not a big deal. You don't have that many things at your disposal. But in the later stages of the game, when you have things like bombs and boomerangs and the ability to jump, you're constantly having to switch back and forth. So you would think with the Nintendo Switch and all of these buttons on the controller, you would have a better inventory system, but you really don't. You have 2 buttons mapped as your items, and all the other buttons just don't do anything. And it's annoying, because in the later stages of the game, you're having to use things like the ability to jump across things, or switch to a boomerang, or switch to a bomb. And it seems to be happening all the time. So you're constantly going into the menu system and having to put these items onto things. Now, of course, they have improved some things. So things like the power bracelet are automatically put onto your character, so you don't have to go into the inventory system for that. But I would have liked to have something like a quick swap feature, maybe map it to a button to where you can just swap out your items a lot quicker, instead of having to pull up the menu, go into the menu, set the item to a certain button, and then exit the menu. It doesn't really happen too much in the start of the game, but as the game progresses, you're constantly getting more items, you're constantly getting more things, and you constantly have to use these items. And it just seems weird that they did not think to change this. They did such a great job implementing a better map system, a better graphical system, and a better gameplay system, yet they just completely forgot about the inventory system, which is a key thing in this game. So yes, I do have some nitpicks with The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, but that doesn't mean it's not a fantastic game. It's a game that I absolutely loved as a kid, and it's a game I'm absolutely loving as an adult. If it's your first playthrough, it could last anywhere from 15 to 20 hours. If you've played through the game before, you pretty much know what you're doing. I believe it took me about 11 hours to complete the game on my first playthrough, but there is reason to go back and play the game once again. You can unlock different tunics, there's collectibles to do in the game, and of course you have a hero mode as well that's actually available at the start of the game if you're looking for a bit more of a challenge. I still think The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening is a fantastic game on the Nintendo Switch, and it'll definitely be one of the fondest games of 2019, but I feel like if Nintendo would have made a few more steps, maybe solidified that frame rate, added a better inventory management system, and maybe added some online functionality to the Dungeon Maker, this could go down as one of the greatest Legend of Zelda games of all time. The source material still is one of the greatest Legend of Zelda games of all time, but I feel like this game could have withstanded the test of time if they would have made some minor improvements to make it a bit more modern. At the end of the day though, I still think you're going to have a lot of fun with this game. It's definitely a game I've enjoyed playing, and I probably will do subsequent playthroughs through the game, but I just wanted to tell you guys the truth about it because I feel like some reviewers sort of glossed over these issues, and I'm not going to do that to you guys. So let me know in the comments section down below what you think of The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. Did you pick up this game for the Nintendo Switch? Do you have memories of the Game Boy version of the game? And as always folks, thank you guys for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Be sure to check out other videos on the channel, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.